Fox News was just a bonanza last night. Well, I guess we should start with Trump. We should do a little bit more about Trump last night, and then we'll move on from there. I presume most people watched the press conference yesterday. If you have not, I rarely ever suggest that you do this, but you should watch it, because this was almost as if the president had walked out without his pants on. That would be disgusting. This was also disgusting. And here he is, and we have, they've done like close-ups of his aides, but they're coming out talking about an infrastructure program. They're walking out in the Trump lobby to hold this press conference. He talks about the infrastructure program, how it's going to be great. We may get Democrats. Then he goes off the rails as he's asked to explain a little bit more about his statements. He could have just said, look, I've given my statement. Nazis are reprehensible. Let's move on from this. As a country, we need to heal and come together. Right? He could theoretically say that if he had the ability to hide what was in his heart. And I think Donald Trump, if he were here with us now, if he said, like, look, maybe I'm just too honest, and if that's a crime, then guilty. But it also turns out he's guilty of some other, I think, arguable crimes. But here is Donald Trump, not able to contain the burning racism inside his heart.
Sir, you said there was hatred, there was violence on both sides.
Well, I do think there's blame. Yes, I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either. And if you reported it accurately, you would say.
Neo-Nazis started this. They showed up in Charlottesville. They showed up in Charlottesville to protest.
Excuse me. They didn't put themselves down as neo, and you had some very bad people in that group. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group.
Apparently, there were very fine people who were marching with those torches, chanting blood and soil. You will not replace us. Jews will not replace us. They were very fine people who were just upset about this Confederate statue in a state that most of them didn't even live in. Very fine people. Very fine people. Continue.
People in that group. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name.
Robert E. Lee are not the same.
No, George Washington was a slave owner. Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down, excuse me, are we going to take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him? Okay, good. Are we going to take down the statue? Because he was a major slave owner. Now we're going to take down his statue. So you know what? It's fine. You're changing history. You're changing culture. And you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than
Pause it for 1 second. I want you to dial back. So I want to address, obviously, the idea that Robert E. Lee's statue would come down was not because he owned slaves. The idea was that he fought and revolted against this country to protect the institution of slavery. And we all know these statues, 80% of these statues commemorating the Confederacy went up almost 50 years after the Civil War, at a time when Jim Crow laws had been instituted at a time when the last vestiges of Reconstruction laws had been, in many places, repealed in certain areas and subjugated. And when Donald Trump says you're changing history, you're changing culture, what culture is it that we're changing? What culture is it that we're changing? That would have been the question to ask Donald Trump. What culture is being changed? One where, what culture would be changed? That is actually the point. It is to change the culture. And how is that culture changing in such a way that he doesn't like it? Continue.
So you know what? It's fine. You're changing history, you're changing culture, and you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the press has treated them
white supremacists
absolutely unfairly.
The press has treated those white supremacists unfairly. I'm curious. I haven't heard from those people. Maybe that's it. Maybe there is a media blackout of the non-white supremacists, non-white nationalists, non-neo-Nazis.
Like historical preservationists. They're just out with torches because they just don't, they could be just as easily protecting a monument in Harlem or Mecca. And they just don't like to see things taken down.
Or, got to be fair, could have been some Civil War reenactors there who are also very sensitive about that.
Right.
So, this is why this was so naked. This is why people are just up in arms.
Can I just, Matt, I just IM'd you, and I don't.
But I want to admit something. We're not being very nuanced here.
No.
He did say there were bad people on both sides.
But this is the point. What I just IM'd you because we touched on. No, I know you're joking, obviously, but when we talk about people like Sam Harris, or in a more sophisticated way, Peter Beinart wrote this ridiculous piece about Antifa and the rise of the violent left. And Corey Pine and I talked about this on the other show. It's just absurd. Mitt Romney, I'm not, whatever. I'm not trying to rehabilitate Mitt Romney, but look at what he tweeted out. Peter Beinart and Sam Harris cannot get this point.
No, not the same. One side is racist, bigoted, Nazi. The other opposes racism and bigotry, morally different universes.
Why can he pick that up? And let alone Trump, but not even people playing false equivalency. Mitt Romney could pick that up.
Right. And the point is morally different universes. When you want to talk about Sam Harris, right? Who tweeted out, identity politics are detestable. White identity politics are more detestable, right? So they're on a continuum. They're on the same spectrum. One is bad, but one is worse. But they're on the same spectrum. Yet, when it comes to our bombing civilians and terrorist bombing civilians, he can see a very clear distinction, which is that, and even though when we bomb, we know exactly what collateral damage will be. I mean, down to a person, we know this definitively, no question whatsoever. But he sees us less morally culpable. In fact, it's a completely different moral universe. I don't know if he used those exact words. Sam Harris, forgive me for paraphrasing. But for some reason, he can see that moral distinction, but he can't see the moral distinction between the identity politics that are involved in, maybe I felt completely underrepresented in the history of this country because of my gender or my race. And when I see someone who is of my gender or race, who have been historically locked out of power, that I presume that they're going to be able to actually address my issues so that we can live in a more egalitarian society versus I think that white people are under threat from having all their power taken away. And so I hate these white. In fact, the idea that if there was such a thing of white identity politics that did not involve racism, I mean, you certainly can have identity politics that don't involve, being anti-men or anti-white.
Well, this is the problem with it, just everything that he does, and this whole larger movement is totally ahistorical. That's why, and that's why you could never make people felt comfortable when it was just mouthing off about Muslims, but it was the same pattern. No understanding of history, no understanding of context. So here it is.
I mean, this is even more egregious because it's not like you don't learn this stuff in elementary school.
And
I mean,
well, this
Mila has a sense of like the Civil War.
Well, someone tweeted out, I think it might have been Jabari Brisport, but it was like, it would have been nice if white people said like, let's not make this all about race when they were founding the country.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, of course, this is the
they had that insight then.
We need to be race blind now. Hi, folks. Sam Cedar here. We still need your help on our Patreon page. YouTube ads have come back, but not nearly as much as we had before. So if you can help us out, any little bit helps. Head over to our Patreon page right at this URL, and you'll help us keep helping you by making videos